I'm Sarah Carlson. I'm the Executive Director of our Wilmer Area Community Foundation, and I also support the philanthropies in Sauk Center and now in Greater Melrose. This morning, it is my obligation and honor to introduce our keynote speaker for the morning. And Dr. Jolly just told me I can go off script and say whatever I want, which, if you know me, might be slightly dangerous. But there is work to be done this morning. So Dr. Eric Jolly is the president and CEO of the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation, which is an organization that we work with all the time and is working to create an equitable, just, and vibrant Minnesota where all communities and people thrive. It has its roots in St. Paul and has been around since 1940 and has partners across the state. It is the largest community foundation in Minnesota and stewards $1.8 billion in charitable assets, including work of philanthropies of the F.R. Bigelow Foundation, the Mardag Foundation, and a statewide network of more than 2,000 charitable organizations and donor-advised funds. Each year, the foundation and its donors make over 8,500 grants to agents and agencies of change. Dr. Jolly joined the foundation in 2015. As a lifelong educator and scientist, his signature leadership style has been to listen deeply in the communities that he serves. As a result, Dr. Jolly has focused the foundation on 3 distinct strategies: inspiring generosity, advancing equity, and investing in community-led solutions. The consistent thread that's woven throughout his vast career is the belief that all humans deserve a life filled with dignity and opportunity. Dr. Jolly will be ending this chapter of his charitable work in 2025, and we are so honored to have him here to start our day. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Eric Jolly.
My mother told me when the introduction is better than the speech you have to give, you should just say thank you and sit down. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the leadership that you bring. I'm going to take a moment. How many here are on boards for foundation? A few of you? Wow. And everyone who's not, how many of you are on some board somewhere? That's the whole room. When I travel to other foundations and I sit down with the board members, I want to take a special moment to thank them and thank you for that work. It's really exciting to run a foundation. I can blame staff for everyone I say no to. I can take credit for everyone they say yes to. I have a wonderful life that wouldn't be possible if we didn't have long and sometimes tedious board meetings that get involved in incredible detail, that provide governance functions, that sit in and oversee our audits, our finances, our investments, and our connectedness to the community. And if we can't send those reports to the Attorney General's office of our meetings every year, we don't have 501c3 status, and all the good work that we want to take credit for helping the community achieve doesn't get done. So for each of you who are sitting through what I hope are the most boring audit and committee meetings ever, exciting ones are not really as much fun as they seem. Thank you. Thank you for making the work of foundations possible. A lot of what I want to talk about was listed in the introduction. We really are invested in a just, equitable, and vibrant Minnesota in which all people and communities thrive. And I'd like to share a couple of stories about that journey. The first one started with me as a young man. I grew up in a rural community, and someone said, what's the difference between a rural community and a city? And I heard a great definition. In a city folks ignore sirens and pay attention to gunshots. And rural folks ignore gunshots and pay attention to sirens. So I grew up in that latter, in a wonderful, charming community where if you look back, you'd say you didn't have a lot of resources, but we had a roof over our head and a plot of land so we could hunt, fish, and plant our vegetables. When you don't have a lot of money, you watch what your parents do. And it was an odd thing. I'd watch every Friday my father would come home from work having cashed his paycheck. He'd put some money in an envelope, and that envelope would go behind the refrigerator. Now, it didn't matter how tough that week was. If you ran out of meat and food by Wednesday, you'd be eating a lot of pasta. You never touched that envelope. And as a kid, I just noticed that. And then one day, my sister got sick. Now, this was not that long ago, but she was ill, and the doctor came. They did house calls back then, and the doctor gave my sister some medicine and an exam, and then I'll never forgive my sister for this. My brother and I each got a shot of penicillin prophylactically. She's sick, I got the shot. I'm just saying. My mother also got an exam and some medicine, and it was a wonderful, it was a quick visit. And then I saw my father do something I'd never seen before. He reached behind the refrigerator and he took down that envelope. And he said, "Doctor, how much do I owe you?" The doctor looked at me and my mother, my brother and sister, and he said, well, Mr. Jolly, I'm an Indian kid. A doctor came to my home, and he just called my dad Mr. I mean, wow, I couldn't believe it. He said, Mr. Jolly, and my eyes grew big. He said, Mr. Jolly, I gave 2 shots and 2 prescriptions. I'm going to have to charge you a little more than usual. Would $5 be too much? Well, I'm not that old. $5 wasn't that much even back then. But what that doctor did, he didn't look at my dad and say, "Look, I know you're kind of poor. Have you got $5?" He said, "Mr. Jolly, I need to charge you a little more. Would $5 be too much?" In front of my father, for my father, in front of his kids, that doctor gave him dignity. He gave him respect and recognition and honored him. And it was one of the greatest lessons in my life. When you hear us talk about agents and agencies of change, it's because I want us to recognize who does the work. When I got a call on whether I wanted to work for a foundation or not, I said, "No, thank you. I don't want to do that." I remember sitting with my predecessor and telling her, I'm tired of working with your staff. They have a lot of good advice for stuff they've never done before. I know you do some things, like you convene and you invest in that kind of stuff, but we're the ones doing God's work for you. We're out there with the kids. We're doing the probation work. And now that I have the job on the other side of that checkbook, I still agree with me. Those agents and agencies of change, the people who have the passion to do the work we get the privilege to support, are amazing individuals. And when we look at the title of this speech, Harnessing the Power of Community, New Strategies in Grantmaking, I'll give you 2 minutes on new strategies in grantmaking, but I'd like to give you a little more time on harnessing the power of the community. It's not about a set of transactions that you put together. We put together a new grant-making strategy. We convened numerous community boards and community groups. We put together boards from different organizations and foundations because as a board, they act differently in their oversight. Their agencies of change have a different story from each of their points of view. And we put together teams of professionals who have been doing philanthropy and community change for a long time. We met over and over again, and yes, that was a good practice, but that isn't how you put communities at the center of your work. How you put communities at the center of your work, in my opinion, is you work on the values in your organization that says the communities are the source of power, strength, and change. That's how you put them to work. When you give people dignity, you recognize their agency, you recognize their capacity, you recognize their power. And if you do that in your philanthropy, you grant them that power, that agency, and recognition of their knowledge. And so every foundation I've ever worked with has talked about who benefits from our largesse. How many children were fed meals, how many senior citizens were taken to doctor's offices, however you want to measure, how many students got instruments for their band. All these wonderful things are well worth measuring. But we ask some different questions. In addition to who benefits from our work, we ask the question, who informs the work? Who set the agenda? Who said this is the priority for this community at this time? During COVID, the federal government did a very wonderful thing. They went to the Gila River Reservation and they built an assistive memory care center. That's a very nice thing. I mean, there's no denying it. Now, its occupancy rate has never hit 50%. It's hovered around 30%. See, because in Gila River, the average life expectancy is just shy of the average age of onset to Alzheimer's. 80% of men aged 35 and older have diabetes. If you were to ask the people at Gila River what they would like, they might tell you an assistive memory care living station is nice, but they will certainly tell you we'd like to live long enough to worry about it. Who informs? Who sets the agenda? Who says what the priority will be? That's clearly something that belongs to those agents and agencies of change, to the community that understands what makes them different. That they ignore the gunshots and pay attention to the sirens. It's a different culture than what you find in an urban setting. And they need different ways of being. They have different priorities. How do we listen? Who informs the work? And then we ask, who forms the work? Who actually built the intervention? Do they speak literally or figuratively the language of that community? 30 years ago, there were some headlines in Minnesota. We created this Ready for K test. You may remember it. Every student takes a test to tell whether they're ready to start kindergarten. It's a simple test, really. It's a test of vocabulary. Can the child identify real words or nonsense syllables? But we outsourced that. And the people who formed that test came from Iowa. And it turned out that 6 of the so-called nonsense syllables, unbeknownst to them, were real words in the Hmong language. Now, you see, income aside, the number one predictor of graduating college at 4 years old, there are very few of them, but the number one is being truly bilingual. Truly bilingual kids from the Hmong community were being put in remedial programs instead of in advanced programs because the person who formed the test didn't understand the community, literally did not speak the language of the community. It's been rectified after the headlines. But who forms? Who informs? Are they the community who you wish to benefit? That's not simply a matter of practice. It's a matter of values. When we were working to put together our first strategic plan over a decade ago, the charge that we were given was, please don't list common values. You know, honesty, integrity, all of that. If you don't have honesty and integrity, you're going to get fired. So I'm not going to list it. There are some baselines we have here. Community as our compass. That one doesn't show up everywhere. We could talk about these values, and there were several of them. You can find them on our website. But more importantly, talk about what those values mean. How are they manifest? How do they show up? Mahatma Gandhi once said, "There go my people. I must follow them, for I am their leader." That informs, forms, and benefits in a very concise manner. In our organization, we talk about values and the implications and what they mean, how it will show up, what conflicts it will create, what opportunities those values will address, what needs are they responsive to, and where are we blindsided? When your staff works with values deeply and long and understands the commitment of the board, the leadership, our partners to those values, something magical happens. One of my most proud moments as a CEO, and I've been a serial CEO, guilty of that sin for over 35, 40 years. My proudest moment was at the foundation in St. Paul. I had a farm in Wisconsin, and I was driving to it Saturday morning, and I still hadn't synced my phone in my car, and those kinds of things don't happen, so I just don't answer the phone when I'm driving early morning. The phone is ringing and ringing and ringing, and it's early, and I'm, who's going to call at that hour? I figured some sort of teleservice trying to tell me something from the East Coast. But when I finally got to the farm, I picked up the phone and checked the messages, and I found out that Dar al-Farouk Mosque had been bombed. Horrible thing. So I called my office. It's a Saturday morning. And I said, what are we doing? And here's what I was told. Well, this vice president is on the way to the mosque to give a speech. This vice president is writing the speech while she's driving. This vice president has opened an account for Dar al-Farouk so people can give money and support it. And this vice president has already transferred $10,000 to show we mean it. No one waited to see if I approved. No one asked. No one hesitated. Everyone knew from the way we exercised our values that this was who we are. This is what we do. This is the right thing for us. I have never been more proud of a team in my entire life because they didn't ask permission. They lived our values. And so the work that we have in foundations is to make sure that our team, our leadership, our boards understand our values and that our community recognizes them and knows that they can rely on us to live up to them without hesitation, without checking in. Now, all of that sounds really wonderful. And I need to tell you, it's far from complete. Have you ever been accosted by a young person who says, hey, have you got 50 cents? I'm hungry. I have regularly. I live in St. Paul. In the Skyway, it's happening more than it should. And my response isn't, I don't have 50 cents. It's, what the hell are you going to buy for 50 cents? How do I help them get a meal? How do I help them see something better? In communities of people who have been without, who have been wanting, their head has been bowed. And once a head is bowed, you don't see as far to the next horizon. We have to help people see something bigger. Not just asking for 50 cents, hoping that 5 requests later you have enough for a $1 protein bar. But something bigger and something better. And I'll often put my arm around the young person, go buy them that protein bar and talk with them about where they're going that day. I don't advise them where to go, I just ask. But what I've learned from that is we need to not only pay attention to who informs our work, who forms our work and how they benefit, who sets the agenda, who develops the intervention, who designed the way to solve the problem. We need to do something more. We need to find ways to inspire them to a further horizon, to see a way in which they can take their hopes, their dreams, their lives, their community, their families a little further than they'd ever imagined. And so the second part of our work is to be those people who collect and gather the stories of success, of overcoming adversity, of dreaming bigger and paint a picture for people so that they can understand where they can go, not just where we'll let them go. What they can ask for, not just what we will give. What they can achieve, and help them find a way to get there. When we bring in speakers for our staff, when we support programs in our community, when we do things like East Metro Pulse, a survey we do every 2 years of our community to measure community connectedness, what we're really doing is finding ways to understand not only what people aspire to, but where we can inspire them. And so a lot is changing in our foundation world. As we speak, we worry about shifts that people are having to face from the administration. In some of our colleges and universities are facing a new bill in this state that could tax earnings of endowments for them. We should be afraid. Who's going to make a major gift knowing it's going to be taxed in perpetuity? They face a lot of challenges, but these people are our agents and agencies of change. We need to help them see a further horizon, dream bigger, and achieve more. I think I was told that if I could keep this well under 30 minutes, you wouldn't ask as many questions and I could leave sooner. No, it was a chance to ask questions. So what do we do now? Well, we look at how we're going to impact and create change. And how much time have I got left? I'm good. I have time for one more story. I was a young faculty member teaching psychology long, long ago. And I wanted my students to meet some of the greatest minds in the field of psychology. And, well, I knew I wasn't it. And some of my colleagues in the department were really good, but they weren't there yet. So I made a few phone calls, and I asked some people if they would talk to my students. Just if we read an article or a book, could we put you, this was back in the days before Zoom, could we put you on speakerphone and we'd talk to my students? Now, if you know psychology, you'll recognize some of the names. B.F. Skinner, Carl Rogers, Patricia Self, Arnold, Lazarus. They're pretty good names in psychology. And one of the people who we had was a man named Viktor Frankl. Now, Frankl was important to psychology because he created something called logotherapy, the sort of a therapeutic application of existential philosophy. Not something you need to worry about. What I want you to know about Viktor Frankl is that he was an original student of Sigmund Freud's. And he worked with Freud in the clinic every day. And at one point in his life, he had a vision. He saw a way to bring psychoanalysis into the next century, heaven forbid. And from that moment on, that became his passion. It meant everything to him. He would come home at night from the clinic and he'd sit at the kitchen table and start writing out his notes. He would get as much information down as he could. He was often spending less time with his family, with his friends, even skipping a meal now and then. This was everything to him. This was his passion. That vision meant it all. And what you should also know about Viktor Frankl is he was Jewish. And one evening, while he was working on his manuscript, the Nazis came to arrest him. And he did a remarkable thing. He ran into his bathroom and he wrapped nearly 300 pages of manuscript around his chest under bandages, and he smuggled it into the concentration camp where he hid it underneath the slats of the bed that he was sleeping on. And there, for over a month, he kept his vision and his passion alive. And then one day, the Nazis discovered his manuscript. And right in front of Viktor Frankl, they burned his life's work, his vision, and his passion, one page at a time. That same week in different camps, they burned his wife and his children. Viktor Frankl was rescued, if you can call it that, from the concentration camp literally days before his number tattooed inside of his left forearm was up. But everything he had ever believed in and everyone he had ever loved had been destroyed. And he was cast into a horrible despair. It took more than a year, but he emerged from that despair and he abandoned psychoanalysis completely. And he gathered a new vision. And he wrote a book dated by its title called Man's Search for Meaning. My students had read that book, and we had Viktor Frankl on the telephone. Now, these were the days of low tech. You actually had to sit in front of the speakerphone to be heard. And so I had the students each submit their question, and I put them in some sort of logical order so that they could sit in front of the speaker and ask their question. The first student asked her question. It was like, oh my God, we got a brilliant mind on the end of the phone. The next student asked a question, and it was just dazzling. The third student, well, he kind of sauntered on up to the phone, and then he did not ask the question he submitted. He said, so, Dr. Frankl, if your therapy's so good, could you have cured Adolf Hitler? Oh my gosh. The room went silent. We just waiting for the inevitable click buzz. Those of you who don't know, that's what happens when you hang up an old style phone. But he didn't hang up. There was a lot of silence. And I was nervous. I was paying long distance rates to Austria on a faculty member's salary. But then Viktor Frankl said something I'll never forget. He said, Hitler could have been a painter. Well, I wasn't at Harvard yet, so I took the plunge. I said, huh? He said, well, Hitler spoke about it. His friends even wrote about it. More than anything else, a young Adolf Hitler wanted to be a painter. He tried murals and large canvases, and they wouldn't sell. He tried sketches, and they weren't going anywhere. But he would sit on the sidewalk selling pencil postcards he had drawn. And Viktor Frankl said, but for the lack of one kind person, someone engaging and telling him that's your passion, your work, you should pursue it. Well, said Viktor Frankl, Hitler might have been a painter, and much of the world could have been changed. That story stuck with me, and I didn't know why it was playing in my head as we continued our conversation with Viktor Frankl, eventually ending it. And then I remembered a moment in my life. I ran down the hall to my office, and I called up Richard. I was on my way as an undergraduate to the admissions office. I was about to drop out of college. I was getting degrees in physics and psychology, and I decided I didn't like having to work in teams for physics, and well, no one got a job in psychology back then. So I should take my father's advice and become an auto mechanic, which I still love, and I can rebuild a generator. They just don't put them in cars anymore. And that would have been a lovely, perfect life. And I was sitting on the steps waiting for it to open to drop out when a faculty member stopped by and he asked me what I was doing. And when he heard he didn't want me to drop out, he said to me one sentence. I won't share it with you. It's mine. It's not yours. It wouldn't mean anything. But it told me I could succeed at anything I wanted if I loved it. And I remembered that sentence, and I remembered it because of Viktor Frankl's story of how one kind word could have changed the life of a world, not just an individual. And I ran down the hall, and I called Richard. I said, Richard, this is Eric Jolly, and I want to thank you for it. And he said, who? And after a while, we spoke, and he remembered. But the moment that changed my life, he doesn't recall. It was simply one act of kindness, one act of inspiration, one act of affirmation that changed the whole course of my life. I've lectured in 28, 30 countries. I've had a good life. And it's all because of that one individual. As we think about harnessing the power of community, new strategies for grant making, if we can, plant these ideas firmly in the soil of regard for our community, of values, because it doesn't matter the way you approach it. We'll all do it differently. But if you own the values, if your company knows, if your community knows, well, then someday that simple act of kindness will change some part of the world in someone's life, and you'll never know it. but I assure you it will be there because we can change the world together. Thank you for your time and for your patience.
So this room is full of a lot of board members who help lead community foundations across Greater Minnesota. And so if you could give them some advice about, for a board that might be interested in changing who informs their work, where would you tell them to start, and how would you tell them to stay rooted in their intention for change?
I like your word intention. And so with a number of boards that I work on, we create a matrix of experiences, talents, and perspectives, and we recruit to that. It includes something that took me a long time to get over, generational perspectives. We moved from a board it's a volunteer board. And you're more likely to have time to volunteer if you're retired or near retirement, if you don't have to punch a clock every day and things like that. But that's not always going to be the board that informs as well as you need. So start with a matrix that does an honest survey of who you have on your board and how it compares against the community you wish to serve. And be willing to invest in bringing those individuals on board. I'm trying to remember if I can, I won't remember the word, sadly. I was doing some work with the National 4-H Council, and their board included a very young person, 2 teenagers who attended with their parents. Their parents left the room during the board meeting, and I was asked to present, and I saw the young man take his name tag and write out something on it, and then I began my talk, and about the middle of my talk, he holds up his name tag, the other side, and just said, big words don't tell stories. Oh, I was a professor. I lived off of big words. The other word that he had written down and shared with the prior speaker was jargon. It's a little intimidating to meet another generation who will judge you, who will share with you their perspectives. But we have to have the courage to meet that. I am not suggesting you put teenagers on your board, but I am suggesting that the people who work with them every day who are trying to change their lives might be good informants if you want to do youth programming. That the people who work on the farms in your community might be great people to help understand what their needs are when it comes to transportation, healthcare, and housing. That we need to get more diversity on our board of experiences and backgrounds. And it takes a lot of effort. It is intentional. It is not what happens naturally. Naturally, we bring people who look like us, who have the time that we have, and who enjoy us. So do that and be willing to orient not just the new members, but the old members, again and again, to the issues of governance versus management and understanding what your values are. If your board is not talking about values, you're not helping your community. Now, I know we're doing question and answers. I want to invite you, non-secretaries are my friend. You don't have to build off of my speech. You can ask me anything. If I don't like the question, I won't answer it. But I don't have a dog. I used to. Whatever you want to know. We got one here and then one here.
Good morning. My name is Bashir. I'm with CAR. Thank you, Mr. Jolly, for sharing your insights with us. How do you ensure that we move people from the point of informing you, but to a point of forming with you?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So as we laid out our grant-making redesign, We spent a lot of time with multiple groups, lots of community groups, lots of board of representatives from different nonprofits, including foundations, and teams of people who are experts in their fields. And we brought them together, and we spent a lot of time just scoping out the landscape. Tell me what you see. Tell me what your issues are. And then we wanted to define the opportunities, and we wanted to define the problem spaces. So if you're not allowing the community to define the problem spaces, to identify the opportunities, the things you want to amplify, the things you want to decrease, and bring them in conversation with you about your capacity to do that. I want to talk about that a little more. If you're doing that, then you're beginning to have them a part of the forming. Once you do that, you've got to create a process by which grants can be made that address the opportunities and the problems without overtaxing the organizing people. Shirley Malcolm, a dear friend of mine, we were talking about the role of evaluation in grant making, and I'll never forget her line. She said, well, you know, Eric, sometimes it seems we spend more time weighing our babies than we do feeding them. Get the good enough measure, not the perfect measure, of the right thing, not the thing you dream about. And get out of the way. Don't let measurement interfere with practice. And be open to the fact that people might solve a problem a bit differently than you would. And in the way that they can be comfortable with. We had an issue in St. Paul 20 years ago. Our Somali community, our newest Somali community, was suffering from really poor dental hygiene. And we tried to figure out why. And in communicating with people who worked with that community, people who were from that community, they came back to us and they said, well, your foolishness is why. I said, well, my foolishness? I said, yeah. We've got a group of people who have been refugees. There are a couple of things they don't trust. Number one, the government, rightly so, and number two, their water source. So they're spending an inordinate amount of their money on bottled water, and their kids are not getting any fluoridation, which, despite some efforts as a scientist, I will tell you, is a very powerful and valuable thing for dental health. So please don't share that with the Secretary of Health. And fluoride is a good thing. And all it took was a different realization of what the source of the problem was. And we worked with the Somali community to find a way to communicate to the community in a way that the community was fully receptive to. They saved money. They weren't spending a lot of money on bottled water. Their children's health, dental health increased. And it was because they defined a problem differently than we saw it. We saw the problem of dental care. These kids are brushing their teeth. They saw the problem as trustworthy sources of water and knowing it's true. No one ever created that kind of welcome that helped them understand what kind of supports they could rely on and trust. And no one in their community was given that power or the resources to do it. So help them define the opportunity space, the problem space, and the process for delivering to it. Measure outcomes that matter to those individuals, not to you. And if you talk about the parameters of change that you can live with, you'll find a way to solve a problem. Often less expensive than you would ever imagine, and often to a different means than you would have imagined. We don't have enough money to solve all the problems in the world, right? If we were to take the world's largest foundation, the Gates Foundation, liquidate everything, sell the buildings, sell the cars, get rid of the parking lot, spend down every piece of the endowment, every penny they have, no salaries to any staff. Depending on your estimate, that foundation would be able to support 5.5 days of K-12 education in the United States. And then it would all be gone forever. Foundations don't have enough money to supplant what good systems of government, of cities and towns, and of commerce and our economy can support. So we need to let people know really what can we do, what is our space of opportunity, and we need to let them define with those limited resources, what are the problems they want to reduce, what are the opportunities they want to accelerate. Sorry, that was a long answer to a short but wonderful question. Thank you. Another question?
I'm Bill Fusard from White Bear Lake. I'd just like to thank you for your leadership. We've been working with the St. Paul Foundation since I've been 22 years old for different projects. Thanks to Meals on Wheels. You guys taught us how to help us get what we really needed. White Bear Lake with Lakeshore Players, things like just throughout the years, you guys really help us learn how to present what we're needing. Your leadership's incredible. You do so much for so many people. Let's give Dr. Jolly a round of applause.
Oh, gosh. You're all very kind. I'm going to take a moment, Casey, others. My staff, would you stand for a moment? These are the people who do it. Okay. Thank you. I'm the one who gets out of their way. So I very much appreciate it. Yes, when we say community is our compass, we spend a tremendous amount of time on it. New employees often say, what are you doing? You've said that already. And we're going to say it many more times until you say it so often you'll forget that it was odd to your ear the first time you came. So thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? No? You guys?
I have one final question for you, Dr. Jolly, and that is that as you conclude your chapter at St. Paul, Minnesota, I'm wondering what your fondest hopes or dreams for the community philanthropy field might be for the next year to 3 years in the future. What would you, magic fairy wand, what would you like to see happening in community philanthropy in Minnesota?
So one of my favorite things to talk about, when I came to the foundation, I said to our team, we're not going to measure how much money we have in our pockets. That's not going to be our measure of success. We had about $750 million in assets under management. I said, we're going to worry more about what money goes into our community. It doesn't have to come through the foundation doors to serve the organizations that we want to serve. And as our team started living into that belief, helping the agents and agencies of change thrive, a miraculous thing happened. Over 200 nonprofits said, will you manage our endowments for us? We trust you. And today, because the money didn't have to be in our pocket is $1.8 billion. That's more than twice it's 100% growth in 10 years. What I hope will happen is that we will see more communities building more small philanthropies and foundations all around this state. It doesn't have to be through a partner with anyone. It can be. But what I hope is we will work with communities who aren't in this room and inspire them to do the work so they can be in this room, that their communities have foundations. I'd love to see an additional 30 or 40 community foundations brought to light in Minnesota. We have 87 counties. We do not have enough foundations, community giving, generosity, and if we can inspire generosity through volunteerism, gifts of donations, through people sharing property that they're no longer using for the betterment of their community, I think we can do a lot. So if I came back and I learned there were 10 new community foundations in Minnesota 3 years from now, I won't be leaving. If I wake up from my naps, which will be more frequent, and learn that, I will be delighted and happy. So more foundations, more generosity, and we can be the ones that bring that on. They don't know what they're missing when they're not here. So thank you very much.